Welcome to The Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into a really intense piece from 1975. It's a speech by Reverend Sun Myung Moon given in Tarrytown, New York, called The Boundary Point of Victory.
Yeah, and this source, it gives us a fascinating window, really, into the unification movement's thinking back then.
Yeah.
What people often called the Unification Church. It was a critical time for them.
So our goal here is to kind of unpack the strategy, right? Get into the nuts and bolts of this radical approach they took. Their diagnosis of America's problems in the mid-70s, which was quite severe.
And the extreme demands, the personal sacrifices they asked of their followers, it was intense.
It really sets up this immediate paradox, doesn't it? You've
Yeah.
got this small group saying they need to achieve victory over America, a huge, successful nation. How did they even define victory? It wasn't just about gaining a bit of influence.
No, not at all. It was much more aggressive. Victory, according to the speech, meant you absolutely had to excel, to overcome, even topple your opposition in any job, any position.
Wow. Overwhelm the other person so that you will defeat that person or topple that person. That's the direct quote.
Exactly. It frames it not just as competition, but as this fundamental battle, almost like a matter of destiny.
Which obviously sets up this incredibly uneven fight. I mean, the source even admits common sense says they should lose. They didn't have, quote, overwhelmingly large quantity of weapons or ammunition.
Right. So if you can't win the conventional way, what do?
You shift strategy.
Precisely. The core strategy becomes guerrilla warfare. Since that direct confrontation was just impossible, the whole approach had to be unconventional, unexpected.
They had to operate, and this is a quote again, against common sense. People peculiar at times.
Yeah, peculiar is one word for it. I mean, when you read about the training,
It sounds almost impossible, some of it. Like having to jump down from a very high place, or being told to climb up on the roof like a circus performer.
exactly. And that training, it seems like it had two main goals. First, create these incredibly committed soldiers, mentally and physically, just erase the idea that anything's impossible or too hard.
Okay, total commitment.
And second, it was a strategy focused on high leverage, not trying to convert everyone, but hitting critical targets. The vacuums, key individuals, or what the source calls the commander in the other army.
The idea being if you convert that leader, you can manipulate their followers.
That seems to be the implication. And to achieve that kind of focus, you needed to completely abandon a normal life.
They were told straight up, don't ask if it's difficult. Forget 8 hours of sleep. Forget looking like a gentleman.
Yeah, it was all about the mission. The mindset had to be, at all costs, I will carry out my mission, period.
And this commitment, it even extended to, well, gender roles and appearance, didn't it?
It did, yeah. The source is quite specific. It says women must sometimes play the role of men, and men must sometimes play the role of women if the mission required it.
Wait, it actually told them to change how they looked? I remember reading that female members were told to study how to make your breasts and hips look smaller.
And men had to learn how to look like women.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a level of dedication far beyond just blending in.
Yeah.
It's like your whole identity becomes purely functional for the mission.
It suggests the goal wasn't just camouflage, but achieving this state of total adaptability, where everything, social roles, appearance, was secondary to the strategy.
Okay, so that level of radical dedication, it makes you ask, what was the emergency? Why this intense regency in 1975?
Well, that takes us straight into their diagnosis of America's problems, and it was grim. The source predicts catastrophe for the U.S. within 10 years. Collapse, basically.
10 years from 1975. And who did they blame?
They pointed fingers externally, the Soviet Union, Red China, North Korea, and they claimed these forces had a specific three-pronged strategy to bring down the U.S. from the inside.
Okay, what were the three targets?
First target, corrupting Christians. The idea was that the nation's main ideology, its moral foundation, was crumbling.
They used this specific jargon, didn't they? About the vertical connection collapsing.
Right, that means the link to God, the spiritual anchor. And the idea is once that vertical link breaks...
Then the horizontal level, human relationships, inevitably follows.
Exactly, which leads to the second target, rupture in the family. They saw society's basic unit breaking down.
And they pointed to things like California's divorce rate, claiming it was actually higher than the marriage rate back then, a sign of total disunity.
But the threat they saw as most immediate, most critical, was the third one, corrupting the youth.
And the main weapon for that corruption,
Yeah.
drugs.
Yes, and here the source makes a very specific and frankly shocking claim. It argues Red China was making opium, smuggling it via Vietnam.
And then American soldiers were bringing it back home.
Right. They called this drug strategy Satan's weapon against the free world. And they added this detail that the communists supposedly banned their own youth from using drugs, saving it just for the West.
And the results, according to the source.
Catastrophic. Drug users become criminals to feed their habit. They mention New York streets being unsafe after midnight in '75 because of this.
And then there's that statistic.
It's incredible. They claimed almost 92% of their own members in the Unification Church had been drug users before they joined.
92%.
Wow.
That really puts their mission in context, doesn't it? They saw themselves not just saving souls, but literally rescuing people society had given up on.
Positioning themselves as the only defense against this coordinated attack on society.
And why was this happening? Why was society so vulnerable? They pointed to a lack of leadership, right?
Exactly, a
Yeah.
leadership vacuum. They criticized policymakers, senators, congressmen, not just for being ineffective, but for basically giving up.
It's just flowing along on the current, as the source puts it, worried only about staying in power or feeling like they were the only person who cared, so why bother?
Right. It implies that maybe the enemy's greatest weapon wasn't force, but just tapping into the existing cynicism and apathy within the U.S. system itself.
Like pushing on an open door.
That seems to be the underlying message. And that vacuum, that sense of societal drift, is what necessitated the kind of radical personal commitment we see demanded of the followers.
Okay, so let's talk more about that commitment, the mental side of it. For instance, members often did street fundraising, selling flowers or peanuts.
Right, a key part of their outreach and funding.
And the instruction was, if you run into an old friend, someone who looks successful and well-dressed, you can't waver. You might feel like a beggar, but you have to stay confident.
Yeah, the advice was to mentally project forward 10 years. Hold on to the belief that while the outside world declined, the members would eventually succeed and excel those people.
And this focus, it demanded cutting off anything that got in the way.
Anything or anyone. The source is incredibly blunt about this. If your family, your friends, neighbors, even the nation itself opposed this divine job,
Yeah,
the instruction was you can cut them all off.
that's a huge personal cost. Severing your most basic human connections for the sake of the mission.
It's the ultimate sacrifice, really. Prioritizing the long-term goal over any immediate comfort or social acceptance. And this dedication, it even reshaped their view of, well, God's role.
You mean the idea that effort comes before prayer?
Exactly. This is a major theological shift. The source explicitly rejects the old way of thinking. I'll just pray hard and God will fix it.
So what's the new formula?
You have to give your absolute maximum effort first, your utmost best. Only the part that is truly beyond your capability, that's where God steps in.
They gave an example, didn't they, about matching couples?
Yeah, the speaker mentions resolving to match 1,800 couples working without sleep to show that extreme human effort has to come first before expecting divine help.
And they even had this formula for speeding things up.
Yeah.
Like if a job takes 10 years,
You want to do it in 5, you have to double the effort.
and to do it in 1/4 of the time, maybe 2.5 years.
You need to triple or quadruple your effort. It's this mindset of accelerating destiny through sheer unsustainable exertion.
Which brings us back to that core theme, the boundary point. Where is victory actually decided?
It's decided right here at the present, not in the future. Every moment, every action, every choice determines success or failure.
And there was a specific sequence to achieving this victory, right? Starting with the hardest things first.
Yes, a clear hierarchy of where to establish the norm, the standard, and it increases in difficulty. First, the individual achieving unity between your mind and body.
Okay, that's step one.
Then, the family, which the source explicitly says is harder than mastering the individual level.
Harder than mind-body unity. Wow. Okay, then what?
Then the church establishing unity there is harder still than the family, and only after mastering those levels can you effectively tackle society, the nation, and the world.
So the family unit is absolutely central. It's the stronghold.
It's the stronghold, the lighthouse, as the source calls it. And these ideal families, they're meant to shine not through wealth, fancy cars, or jewelry, but by thriving in poor conditions, in misery even, through character.
And within the marriage itself, there were specific duties.
Yes. Your primary job is to make your spouse glitter and shine, even without them realizing you're doing it. Only after they are uplifted can you show your own happiness.
That's a very self-sacrificial view of
It
marriage.
is. And this focus on resilience, on enduring hardship for the mission, it even influenced practical advice, like choosing a partner.
How so?
Well, the source says it's actually more practical to choose an ugly girlfriend, their words, who will accept living in dirty and ugly places for the mission.
Than someone beautiful and tidy who might complain about the conditions.
Exactly. It prioritizes resilience and commitment to the cause over conventional attraction. Your spouse becomes a co-fighter, really.
Makes sense within that guerrilla warfare context. And this ideal family wasn't just the nuclear unit, was it? It expanded outwards.
Immediately, the church itself had to become a unified family. All races the source lists, Oriental, Occidental, Negro, white, yellow, melted into one. Absolute oneness.
Why was racial unity so critical for them strategically in 1975?
They saw it as the direct counterweapon to communism. The source argues the communist dialectic method relies on stirring up class and racial conflict to divide nations.
So by creating this perfectly unified, multiracial family under God,
They believed they could shatter that communist strategy at its core, make it irrelevant.
they even brought theology into it, linking the races back to Adam and Noah's sons, Shem for yellow, Ham for black, Japheth for white.
Right. And each member was told they weren't just representing themselves, they were representing their entire race in this project. The pressure must have been immense.
So how do you actually do that? How do you melt these incredibly diverse groups together? What was the secret?
The source gives a one-word answer, love. But it defines love in a very specific way.
Not just warm feelings, I assume.
No. Love is defined as the positive power to influence other people without your having to say anything to them. It's about demonstrable action and impact.
So love equals sacrifice in action, which loops back to that motto they had, right? The 3 points of sacrifice.
Exactly. It breaks down like this. 1, work harder than anyone else. 2, use humbler clothing and food than others. And 3, live in a humbler shelter.
The idea being, if you live like that, nobody can criticize you, and your dedication itself will draw people in.
That's the theory. It's influenced through sheer force of commitment and example.
So if we look back at this whole 1975 strategy, the path to victory they laid out involved just absolute individual courage, didn't it?
Absolutely. Combined with immediate, almost frantic effort. And this deep, unified strength built up sequentially. Individual first, then family, then the church community.
The whole thing framed as this constant present tense battle. Every single thing you do or say is the boundary point of our victory.
It's really a striking model of total commitment, designed specifically, it seems, to fight back against what they saw as a decaying, cynical society falling apart.
And the core argument, the linchpin, is that saving the nation depends entirely on success at the family level.
That's the bottom line. National salvation hinges on the family stronghold.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought, doesn't it? If the family is that boundary point for a nation's success or failure, think about the extreme demands this 1975 model place on individuals and families.
Total self-sacrifice, cutting ties, quadrupling effort.
Right. How does our modern focus, often centered on individual achievement and happiness, measure up against that kind of intense, unified, demanding strategy for collective survival?
That's definitely something to think about. A really powerful question raised by this source. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.